see from the front row just as well as you would at the back or at the front. There are still a few seats over here, downstairs, but if you feel like you don't want to sit squished in between two people, please head upstairs. Before I hand over to our two very special guest speakers, and of course to Chavi, who'll be talking to them, I do want to take a moment before I introduce them as well, to mention that the connection with the speakers and us, Mizrachi, as the hosts is obvious, but the event is actually sponsored and promoted and connected to the Rabbinical Council of New South Wales. And I, for a moment, first of all want to thank my colleagues on the executive, Rabbi Jewry, who's here this evening, but the rest of the executive for their continued support. The Rabbinical Council now has 50 members. 3 years ago it had 7, and the activities they have been able to do both internally for the professional development for Rabbanim, but also for the community in terms of bringing different shuls and communities together, has, I think, been of value not just personally to the Rabbanim around the community, but I think the entire Sydney Jewish community has been able to benefit from that. And this evening is just another one of those events that we have put on for the community. So not just to thank, of course, my executive, but also the group of Rabbanim who I think have become much closer together, and that at the end of the day is what the community wants to see. We also, I do also want to mention, because it's also connected to World Mizrachi, and of course Rabbi Perez is one of our guests this evening. For those who don't know, and even those who do know, it's worth mentioning again that a couple of months ago, 24 rabbis and rebbitzins went on a Rabbinical Council mission to Israel, which I think was not just incredibly inspiring, but life-changing for a lot of people. And that was really made possible by World Mizrachi, who were not just helped make sure it happened, but were there every stage of the way, not just before, but during. And Rabbi Perez, a big thank you to you and your team for making sure that happened. This evening, Chavi, who herself is well known in the community, and her organization, the Empowered Jew, and they've hosted events here as well and throughout the community. We're lucky to have Chavi with us this evening to speak to us two special guests. Rabbi Doron Perez, the executive chairman of World Mizrachi, who I think has the record now for speaking in the most amount of shuls over a 24-hour period. But not just Rav Perez's, not just resilience and inspiring nature, but also his willingness to get off a plane and then literally go from one place to the next to speak, to talk to people, to spend time with them. I've learned a lot from it just over the last 36 hours, and a big thank you for making the trip down to Australia for such a short period of time. And of course, our other speaker, who is certainly no stranger to me, but he's also definitely no stranger to our community, Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon. It's weird to call my dad that, but nevertheless, a title he very much deserves, and somebody who comes here to see his grandchildren, but also we get the benefit almost every time he comes. And I have to say he worked me a lot harder when I went to Perth last month than I have him this time around, but we have the benefit of hearing from every time he's here. So I'm going to hand over to them, to Chavi, to Rav Doron, and to my father, if I can ask him to come up to the bima, and we're going to begin.
We're not doing this today. That's what they are telling me. Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. We are going to be starting off tonight with Rav Doron Perez. You have dedicated your life teaching about the importance of religious Zionism and the state of Israel. That is something that you are extremely passionate about. What does Zionism and the love for Israel mean to you, and why have you decided to dedicate your life to that cause?
That's a great question for me. Firstly, I want to say it's wonderful to be here on many, many different levels. Firstly, to be hosted here by the New South Wales Rabbinic Association, which we saw firsthand in Israel. I met many of the wonderful rabbis and rebbitzins, and we had the merit of playing a role in them coming to Israel, as Rosh mentioned. And a thing that I'm going to speak a lot about during the course of this opportunity is about Jewish unity. And it's a pity that we need our enemies to remind us that we need to come together, but to see how Rabbonim come together and shuls, and it's grown from 7 to 50 rabbis is unbelievable. And only good things can come out of Jews coming together. We had a Surash Lishit yesterday here with 2 shuls, Mizrachi Shul, which hosted it, and Bina across the road, Rabbi Doron, who's also the vice president, along with Rabbi, I think is the president of the New South Wales Rabbinic Association. And it was also special to have 2 shuls coming together for a Surash Lishit. Only good things happen when the Jewish people come together. So it's an honor. Rabbi Garari from yesterday, and all the Rabbonim. Secondly, also this election I'm going to be speaking a little bit about, which I've called often the World Zionist Congress Election, the most important election you might never have heard of. And I'll touch on it perhaps a little bit later, because Jews in Australia have 1 more week to make their voice heard in terms of Zionism, which I'll speak about. But it's also brought many Orthodox communities together, and it's also brought Chavi and I together. Chavi is from the Chabad community. What's it called? What's it called?
The Empowered Jew.
The Empowered Jew. So I knew that I made it when I made it onto Chavi's Empowered Jew podcast. Now I feel like I'm an empowered Jew. So I just want to say, keep up the amazing work that you do. It was a very special podcast, and the fact that you, so many of the Chabad community and the Mizrachi community working so closely together in these elections is very special. And thank you for being interviewed. Thank you for interviewing me. And I want to say finally to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon. Did I say that correctly? Yeah. I want to say, I don't know if I said this in front of you before, but you're allowed to say Chatzi Shavach. To me, Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon is the ultimate Jew. To me. The ultimate Jew, despite the fact that he's Australian and lives in Perth. I want to say why. Firstly, he's an unbelievable mensch, for those who don't know him. An amazing family man. But he's also a community builder. He's a rabbi who never took a salary from rabbinics and built a community, the Dianetta Mizrachi Shul, thanks for making it a Mizrachi Shul, in Perth, an unbelievable shul where him and his wife lived and taken so much responsibility for the Perth Jewish community and the school there, Carmel, and all volunteer. And if you go there for the 1 or 2 Shabbos that I've spent there, you'll see Rabbi Marcus Solomon learning with the young children. He goes out of his way to learn with the young children, and that should be enough. All that should be enough. But he's also an accomplished rabbi and Talmid Chacham, Talmudic scholar, and he's a justice on the Supreme Court of Australia, Western Australia. Okay, so you're still very close to the ultimate Jew, very, very close. You're the penultimate Jew. But I just want to Western Australia. Are you the first Jew to hold that position?
No.
You're still the penultimate Jew. So I just want.
He's the first Orthodox.
First Orthodox rabbinic community building beard. First rabbi. Okay. So I do want to say, for me, that's what Judaism is about. And I haven't also said he's responsible for bringing out shlichim from Israel, young men and women, couples, individuals, to make sure that the community has a strong Jewish and Zionist presence. That's all that in one young man. According to our rabbis, you're only allowed to give half a person's praise. I'm not yet at half, but I'm going to stop there. And I just do want to say, and that's to me what Judaism is about. It's being a committed human being, a mensch. It's being deeply committed of menschlichkeit to one's family, and as a Jew, committed to one's community, committed to both deep commitment to God and to the Jewish people, but also to furthering of God's values of justice in the world. And to have all of that is exactly, I feel, what we at Mizrachi certainly stand for. And it's a pleasure and it's good to be on the panel with you. And my only condition in saying all of that is you're not allowed to say anything about me. If you do, then I take back everything that I said. So what was the question again? I read the question. The question is, what has drawn me to Zionism and why have I decided to dedicate my life to it? I've always been a Zionist. From my mother's milk, I come from a family of Zionists. I have a family of mine, family of the Schattenstein family. Mishpucha is always Mishpucha around. But I want to say that I grew up in a very Zionistic family. Not a religious family, but a Zionistic family. So for me, I grew up one of the few people that I knew in Johannesburg, South Africa, whose grandparents lived in Israel on my father's side. My father was Moroccan born, moved to Israel with a Moroccan aliyah. That's where Perez comes from. Came to South Africa in 1967, one of the first Israelis, and met my mother, and she's like almost all South Africans, Ashkenazi, South African from Lithuania, from Kovna, her parents. And so I grew up in a very Zionist community. My grandparents on my mother's side, Geselte, Louis and Minnie Geselte, blessed memory, were my grandfather, who made it out one of the lost boats in 1937 to South Africa from Lithuania, became known in South Africa as Mr. Maccabi. That's his name. By the way, there are two Louis Geseltes in Johannesburg. Dr. should live be well, urologist Louis Geselte, also a cousin, and my late grandfather, Mr. Louis Geselte, known as Mr. Maccabi. He dedicated his life to building Jewish sport in South Africa. He built the Jewish Girl Country Club in 1957. My mother grew up in the country club's clubhouse. That was where they lived above. And he took from the 1950s to when he made Aliyah with my grandmother in 1979. He was the chair of all the Maccabi teams, which went every 4 years. And so Jewish identity and Israel were part of where I came from. Now, I'm one of the few people I know who grew up with both sets of grandparents living in Israel, because Louis and Minnie, my grandparents, came to our family in 1979. I was 9 years old, and they came and said they had decided to go live in Israel. And even though my grandfather was 59, my grandmother I think 58, and all of their children and grandchildren live in South Africa. Now, normally parents follow the children and grandchildren. Here, the parents were leaving the grandchildren. Why? Because my grandfather said the most important thing in life are your values. And I don't want to be an armchair Zionist my entire life. I, for 40 years, have led the community in Zionist values, and I feel I need to end up in Israel. And he went at the age of 59, 58, and went to work for the Maccabi World Union. So the point I'm trying to make is Israel for our family it's where my grandparents on the one side were, it's where my grandparents on the other side went to. It was so much of who I was as a person, even before I knew exactly what was important to me. I knew that Israel was deeply important to me. I feel incredibly blessed, that as I grew in my Judaism, my parents started becoming more observant. The Rabbi in World Zionist Shul called Rabbi Barry Marcus, and I always mention him because my parents and him are the reason that I'm religious today. And I owe him a tremendous debt from World Zionist Shul, but my parents started becoming more involved. We went to Fairways Primary School. I met now Dr. Peter Kadish, who's one of his children at Fairways. We were just talking about it. It's amazing primary school. And the rabbi convinced my parents that we should all start coming to shul. We all started becoming slowly more religious. He convinced my parents against my better judgment at the time. I was a very sporting young man, played a lot of sports, and I went to Yeshiva College, which wasn't known for its sport. And I was very upset in the beginning, but my parents were very smart. They said, Lawrence, that's my English name, that if you don't like it after one term, you can go wherever you want. But I liked it, and I ended up staying there. My sport's never been the same since. But that's where I grew, and I feel very blessed that as I grew in my Judaism, I feel blessed that it didn't distance me from my Zionism. Because sometimes people's Jewish religious growth distances themselves from what they perceive as secular Jewish nationalism. For me, it absolutely enhanced my appreciation of the Jewish people and Jewish nationalism, because I think, thankfully, my connection to Israel was so deeply embedded. And then I started learning the writings of a person who, other than my parents, had the biggest influence on my life. His name is Rabbi Cook, the chief rabbi of Israel, the pre-state. His writings, nobody embraced Zionism and the centrality of Jewish nationalism and redemption of the collective return of the Jewish people, Zionism as an anchor of Jewish life. That there's not only no contradiction between Jewish nationalism and the return, but one complements the other despite all the challenges. That made a very big impact on me, and I feel blessed that I was able to grow in my Judaism. My Judaism enhanced my Zionism enhanced my Judaism, and hence religious Zionism for me was the most natural thing, because each one enhanced the other one, and that's what I feel very lucky that's what I felt growing up. I do want to say, when I'm at a vernacular camp, and I'll end with this for this question, the vernacular camp, when I grew up, I went back as a madrich to South Africa, and as a madrich, we had to come back. I was living in Israel. They said, we want to inspire the Chanichim, can you in one line, summarize your life until now? And I came up with the following line there. I was 25. Those who were at Fair West Primary School will know, and those who are from South Africa will know that there was a leading, one of South Africa's best cricketers of all time, was a man called Jimmy Cook. He taught me at Fair West Primary School. I became incredibly close to him, very, very close for years and years and years. He was very disappointed when I went to Yeshiva College. He said, I let a lot of people down. He said, why are you becoming a bum? You had such potential. Forgive me for using that word. I was just quoting him in the way he said it. And I realized that at vernacular camp, I realized my life has been a movement from Jimmy Cook to Rabbi Cook. That's what it's been. From Jimmy Cook to Rabbi Cook. And I'm very happy, even though Jimmy Cook is with a C and Rabbi Cook's with a K, but it sounds good. And that's it, I'll go with that. Spelled the same in Hebrew, exactly right.
No, and I love that, because it shows that you can have everything in life in some ways. It doesn't have to contradict each other.
Put that close to your mouth.
Oh yes, thank you. They can blend together.
They can. I think the Torah is a Torah of life. And we spoke about Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon blending it all together. And I think the Torah needs to engage all of life. It needs to uplift all of life, not to disconnect from life, but to uplift all of life. And I think the Torah has space to uplift all of life.
Agree. Okay, thank you, Rav Doron. Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon. We're going to call you after this, Rabbi, if that's okay with you. Okay. You have lived your entire life in, teaching and promoting Jewish values, Jewish education, as Rav Doron has given us a tiny glimpse into that. How do you feel Israel is doing in that department? Do you feel like they're doing enough in promoting the importance of shlichut and Jewish education and Jewish values? What do you think Israel could be doing better?
I'm going to start, as did Rav Doron, with some introductory remarks. First of all, Rav Doron has implored me not to speak about him, so I will not. But I will mention, not to Rav Doron, but to everybody else here, and I hope that Rav Doron may pick this up and overhear what I say. We haven't had the pleasure of Rav Doron in Perth for a few years now, although he has been there in the past. But I just wanted Doron to know that his journey, his resilience, his experience, and his message to the Jewish people through Zoom, through your writing, has sustained people as far as Perth in their faith in the Jewish future. So I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the Jewish people of Perth, and I suspect the Jewish people much further than Perth. That the message that you have given electronically and in writing has literally uplifted people and sustained their faith for the last 2 years. I also wanted to tell you that it was only about 3 weeks ago that I did a tour of Lourdes in London. And they've got a museum, and there's one room which is dedicated to temporary exhibits. The exhibit I think it's still there, it was on 3 weeks ago, is cricket and the Jewish community. They've spread things out to make it look like it's significant, but the main focus, by the way, of the exhibit is South Africa. And they have on the wall a pair of tzitzis from Mandy Yachad in a frame. So if you're going through London, it's worth seeing. So, to your question, Chavi, I have been saying for a while now that I'm concerned about people crafting and defining their Jewish identity by reference to the hatred of Jews. And I think the diaspora communities are in particular danger of founding and creating their Jewish identity as a response to anti-Semitism rather than as a love for the beauty of our tradition. Now, rabbis have been saying that now for 22 months. Nobody listens. When Dan Seymour said it in his State of World Jewry address, everyone went, wow, what a profound idea. Because he says it without wearing a kippah, and he's really a treasure as a Jewish people. If you haven't heard that address, you should, because that's the message that he had delivered so eloquently that rabbis have been saying. There are many, but one of the principal responses we have to take from what has happened, and that we can control, as Dan Seymour beautifully explained, is to take control of our own commitment to our Judaism. So that's a general comment and a concern I have about the way we are reacting as a diaspora community. In terms of shlichut, since this is apparently, I've now discovered a joint Chabad and Mizrachi event, I'm going to say something that I said at a Mizrachi conference, I think 20 years ago, when I was uncharacteristically complaining that Mizrachi and the World Zionist movement was not doing enough to find quality people to send on shlichut. And I implored them to look to the Chabad movement to understand the greatness and the sanctity, not just the importance, the sanctity of shlichut. And I think it didn't go down so well at the Mizrachi conference. I think we've moved on since then. But I could tell you a story that I'm not sure, Doron, if you've heard it, but Zev Schwartz, who's in charge of Torah Zion, loves telling the story. When COVID hit the world in whatever year it was, 2020, all shlichim around the world from Torah Zion B'nai Akiva went home, including the shlichim here, because apparently it was much healthier to be in Israel. No, I'm being. I can understand parents wanted their kids home. It was a really scary time, incredibly scary time. We got together the shlichim in Perth, and I told them that I come from a Chabad background, where shlichut is a sacred calling. I said, do you not think God knew COVID was coming when He sent you as shlichim? You are the shlichim for COVID. You were sent to this community because God wanted you here to help this community through that period. Now you can go home if you want to. Because their parents were screaming at them to come home. They were screaming at us too. The choice is yours. But if you believe in shlichut, if you believe that Hashem wanted you to be on this shlichut, you might want to think about staying. They all stayed. We were the only community that had shlichim over COVID. The next year, we got an exemption to be able to bring people into Western Australia on the basis that they were an essential service. You had to be a mining engineer or a Torah Zion and Am Yisrael, because we showed them how important it was to us.
That's what happens when you're the justice of Western
So I'm going to come back to the point. I actually think the shlichut in Mizrachi has come in enormous ways since then. I think there's a much greater emphasis on shlichut and its importance and its sanctity. I have to say that I was perhaps 30, 40 years ago something of a cynic about the effectiveness of shlichim, Zionist shlichim, because I grew up where Hebrew teachers from Israel were sport, okay? They were sport for kids in high school. But it has been it is now so radically different. I have to tell you, I am in love with the shlichim from Israel. The families that come, the young men and women, and every time they leave our community is traumatized, in tears. They are the lifeblood of our community. And with all the problems that we have in Israel, and there are problems, thank God we're prevailing, but with all the difficulties in the society, every year that they leave, I invite people to look around Australian society and look at what 22 and 23 and 24-year-old people are doing, and look at these young men and women from Israel, and look at the difference. And so I am in love with shlichim. I think as an export from Israel, they are the greatest thing that Israel has ever exported, better than tech chips and my era Jaffa oranges, I think it was.
Soda stream.
The human beings that Israel exports are its finest product. And so I think it's been a great shift, and I think Israel's doing a tremendous job. Having said that, I think it's got to do more. I think there still isn't in the yeshivot, Rav Doron, a belief in the Rosh Yeshiva of the importance of sending these people to our communities, to Sydney, to Perth, to Melbourne, to all over the world. I still don't think, in Chabad, the pinnacle of spiritual achievement is to be a shaliach. Every serious Chabad person can think of nothing greater than to be a shaliach. We still haven't got there in the Mizrachi movement. I think there's still much to learn. So we've come a tremendous way. I think the products we're producing are unbelievable. But I think we still have some way to go in the yeshivot and the midrashot in particular to develop a culture of shlichut where that becomes the pinnacle of spiritual achievement, to take your Torah, your love of Eretz Israel, your love of Torah Israel, and to bring it to other communities. That's the short answer.
You know, if I may add, I think that it's also important for us to realize that every single one of us, wherever we are in the world, we're placed there for a reason. We all have a mission and purpose, and we're all on shlichut in our own way. Whether you're a businessman, whether you're a judge, a teacher, whatever you may be, you're on shlichut everywhere. So there is something incredible about dedicating your life. I know all of my uncles and aunts and my grandparents, they literally are on shlichut, living in very remote places and bringing light there. But all of us are on shlichut in our own way. I think that's an important element to add as well. We're not finished with you, Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon. We've got another question.
If you're going to ask him another question, I just wanted to respond to what he said as well, if I may.
I'd like
I'd like to respond. Okay, so I want to say that I fully agree with Rabbi Solomon, but I'm going to add a caveat to it. The religious Zionist community in Israel is the most shlichut-orientated community I've ever been part of. My son gave his life because of his belief in Judaism and Zionism. Our other son, Jonathan, was injured on the day because of his belief of being in the front lines. Unfortunately, 50% of all the fallen soldiers since October 7th have come from the Bidnaki Mizrachi community. Why have so many of them fallen, even though the modern Orthodox/religious Zionist community in Israel is only 15%? How come 50% have fallen? Because combat soldiers and officers of combat units are totally disproportionate. Around 50% of the officers from both my sons were officers. One is still an officer in the Israeli army. And there's a tremendous value on going to the front lines and putting yourself out there. The second reason is because as the war has worn on, 22 months, almost 653 days, as it's worn on. Less and less, for those who don't know, Israel's army it's a people's army. That's why we're under such pressure. There's pressure for more people to go to the army, because Israel got it totally wrong. We thought that we need a small, smart army because we can rely on digital defenses. We realized we got it totally wrong. We need a very big and strong army. Yes, smart, but very, very big. And Israel now having to rethink all of their military doctrines after we got it wrong for so many years. And Israel's never fought a war so long, and therefore there are people who've been 3, 4, 5, 600 days of reserve duty who've left their jobs in order because Israel can't defend itself. And the religious Zionist community is totally disproportionately represented there. I know of the family struggling of fathers and sometimes grandfathers and sons being away from the family for so long, because we do want to say the value of shlichut in the religious Zionist community is second to none in terms of doing whatever you need to do to put yourself there in the front lines, be it on hitchashvut, of being settling in the land all over Israel, being it in the army, being it in what are called Garim Tornium, to be nucleuses of communities going all across Israel to bring Yiddishkeit. Where I agree with Rabbi Justice 100%, and that's something I'm very dedicated to. I think in life you become a product of your own success. And if you're humble enough, you see that part of your success is actually part of your failure. The religious Zionist community's greatest success is its greatest failure. What is its greatest success? It's absolute dedication to the land and state of Israel. But by doing that, what has happened? We've depleted our communities around the world by people making aliyah. We can't get our religious Zionists to go on shlichut for long-term back to the diaspora communities, because they believe so much in Israel. They believe so much in the land of Israel. When I went back to South Africa on shlichut for 2 years with my wife Shelly and our older son Jonathan, my 2-year shlichut lasted 15 years. And we only came back 13 years later than what we thought. And why? Because when I went back to South Africa, I saw the needs of the diaspora community, and I realized my role is not only to make people make aliyah as a Zionist, my role as a Jew, and a Torah-believing Jew, is to bring people closer to each other and to God, and part of that is the land of Israel. So the transformation that I went through, as one of my rabbis said, the religious Zionist community has got so much to learn from Chabad in the following way, that we became so focused on the land of Israel that our love for our fellow Jews sort of ended at the borders of the land of Israel. Yeah, we'll go to Dash and do them a favor for 2 or 3 years, and they'll go back to Israel. They did do a favor, it's true, but there's still Jews there. I'll give you an example. In Argentina, one of the great successes of the Mizrachi community in Ben Akiva, that almost all the Jews of the community made aliyah. They had to close the school down and Ben Akiva and Mizrachi down. So I said, is that a success? I said, how many Argentinian Jews still are left? 180,000. So who's going to bring religious Zionism to them? You've succeeded in one generation and failed the next. Because if there were no Jews in Argentina, amazing. You don't need to serve the Jews anymore. But there are 180,000 Jews. So what? So I think we've prioritized the land and state of Israel over the people of Israel. And I'm being a little bit critical. I think Chabad has highlighted, second to none, the love of the Jewish people, wherever they are. Second to none. Wherever there's a Jew, if people plan their trips around the world, and I've got a niece and nephew running around the world after their army trips, they go where Chabad houses are. Right? Chabad houses, and Chabad are second to none in terms of Chabad Israel. In terms of the connection to the land and state of Israel, not as much as the Mizrachi community, but that's okay. You can't excel at everything. Sometimes your greatest strength is your greatest strength, but it also leaves space for growth. And I think, meaning, because you can't focus on everything. You focus on everything, then you succeed in nothing. And I think and that's why I actually feel that the partnership between Mizrachi and Chabad is so natural, because Mizrachi is on the front lines of physically defending Israel, and Chabad on the front lines of keeping Jews Jewish everywhere around the world, and they go together and they complement each other. So I wanted to say, I think the value of shlichut, Rav Marcus, is unbelievable in terms of living a life of serving, but we have to make it beyond the land and state of Israel and say, you can serve Jews. Around 7 million Jews live in Israel, 7 million live around the world, half of the Jewish people live around the world. We have to be there for them. And I want to say in the beginning, one of the things that Rabbi Marcus, I didn't say about his many qualities, he's a Chabadnik and he's Mizrachi Shul. He's got it all. He's got all the different things. It's all there. So there is definitely shlichut to learn from that.
Thank you. We're going to take a bit of a different turn. Rabbi, I'm just going to say Rabbi Justice Marcus Solomon, me as well. With everything that's going on right now, you could say that perhaps Israel doesn't have the best PR. So how do you think Israel's legal minds are dealing with the situation right now? Do you feel like they're properly defending what they're doing on the world stage? Do you feel like they're adequately explaining what we're doing? I mean, we're fighting a just war through and through, I truly believe. But do you feel like they're explaining that to the world in the best way, perhaps?
I think they're explaining it. I don't think anyone's listening. That's the bottom line. And if they did it twice as well, people would still not listen. The systemic and organic anti-Israel bias in the so-called legal infrastructure of global institutions is now well documented and well known and well exposed. And so I have the rather grim view that it doesn't really matter how well they do it. It will not help at the moment. So that's a rather pessimistic and grim view, but I think it's frankly a realistic one. At the same time, we shouldn't think that everyone hates us. There's a lot of support, including within the legal fraternity around the world, for Israel. In my own environment, the head of our court is Chief Justice, a person in Australia, and he's spoken in this shul, is an unashamed supporter of Israel. And I've just been last week talking to a group of judges from the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Courts, the federal court and the High Court about a trip to Israel, a solidarity trip to Israel. So there is a lot of support, but the noise is drowned out by the systemic tide of anti-Israel bias in the United Nations and the organs of the United Nations. And so you can always do more. And you can always improve and always do it better. In the present environment, and people should, that isn't a reason to try and not to do more, not to keep going, as deflating as it may be. But I'm very pessimistic about how effective it could be. I mean, people talk, for example, the word genocide is now entered into regular discourse as if it's been established. We wouldn't talk about someone who's a murderer unless they've been convicted. But that only reflects the deep level of bias in the discourse. I mean, there was a federal politician, in fact, a federal member of the Labor Ministry from Western Australia, who made a passing reference to Netanyahu having been found to be, and Gallant having been found to be war criminals. And I rang her office and said, where did you get that information from? And they said, well, everyone knows that's the case. And I said, well, are you being serious? Is that a serious statement? Do you wish to have a discussion about whether that is factual? And they hung up on me. Right? So that was really symptomatic of what we're dealing with. Jewish people should nevertheless be well informed. I mean, anyone who's people should read Tal Becker's opening submission to the International Court of Justice. It's a beautifully eloquent exposition of Israel's position. But the thing I think people should have framed on their walls, and I've met very few Jews who've ever read it, and I think I've mentioned it in this shul before, is Aaron Barak's defense, dissenting judgment in the International Court of Justice. It is a beautifully written, legally magnificent judgment that no one other than Jews even knows exists. And surprisingly, there were people say the International Court of Justice held that Israel is arguably committing genocide in a provisional prima facie manner. But of course it wasn't a unanimous decision. People don't know that. The judges who held in favour of that resolution were Russian, who have a history of, voting against any decision against the Syrian regime at the height of their atrocities. The Chinese judge. It's incredibly political. It's not really, frankly, it's not a court. And international law is not really law. It's fake law. It really is. It's just a manifestation of where the political power lies. But one of the most eloquent, interestingly, for those who know, well, I'm sure everyone knows, one of the most interesting judgments in favour of Israel was written by the woman who's the vice, I think she may have recently retired, but until recently was the vice president of the International Court of Justice. And she had an even stronger defence of Israel than Aaron Barak. She was a black woman from Entebbe. Now, you would think in the present environment that the opinion of a black woman from Africa would be of interest to people. And it would be if it wasn't in favour of Israel. And so all of this, but no, if you just go not necessarily onto the street, people don't really care who are on the street, but if you even go into well-informed legal circles and you ask them, well, was it a unanimous decision against Israel? They would have a clue. So that's the nature of the discourse, the nature of the bias. But we should make sure that we are personally well-informed, and we should support whatever endeavours are being made to advance Israel's interests. People would have seen the Australian, I imagine last weekend, Menachem Borsheimer, who's battling away in Melbourne, and good on him. And there are a number of people who are doing those things. And there's coined this new phrase, lawfare instead of warfare, which is using the legal system. And unfortunately, most of the efforts in that direction are being deployed against Jews. The ECHA are doing things. It's a real uphill battle. So I don't have a very happy message about that, but we need to toughen up, we need to keep going, we need to do whatever we can.
And we need to be empowered, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, we do need to be empowered, although in my generation we didn't use that word, but isn't it?
What word would you use instead? What would you use instead?
Empowered's a good word.
Thank you. Rabbi, whenever you need to go, you
I should explain to people.
Yeah.
One, I'm not as well dressed as Rav Doron, and two, I'm going to have to go early. Those two excuses and apologies are interdependent because I'm actually in Sydney for a function that I have to go to soon, and I had very strict instructions that the dress code at the function was casual. So I'm going to have to slip away soon, and that also explains my lack of formality and not looking quite as dapper as Rav Doron.
That's not only because of the clothes. It's a joke, it's a joke. It's really a joke.
Alrighty. Rav Doron, back to you. What do you feel within Israel, so internally, what do you feel is Israel's greatest strengths and Israel's greatest challenges within Israeli society?
I've long believed in a idea, thesis that I mentioned earlier, that the more I think about myself, the more I think about life, I often find that a person's greatest strengths are also the source of their greatest weaknesses. mentioned about the shlichut in the religious Zionist world. It struggles in its shlichut around the world because of its greater strength, of its single-mindedness for the land and state of Israel. I think Israel's two greatest strengths are the source of their two greatest weaknesses. The greatest strength of the Jewish people in general in the state of Israel is the value we place on human life. We certainly do not target innocent civilians. If there is one country on earth which you could never ever accuse of a genocide, it would be Israel. Yet in the kangaroo courts of international law, I thought that's good to say in Australia, the kangaroo courts. Don't know why they got a bad rap, the kangaroos, but anyway. Why do they call it a kangaroo court?
That's a very good question.
Does the justice know why we call it a kangaroo court?
He does not.
It's okay.
I think a kangaroo would have done a better job.
So what was I saying before I interrupted myself with kangaroo courts? Strangely, I was saying that the genocide is crazy. If there's one people on earth that you couldn't accuse, it would be the Jewish people, the very Jewish people. Yeah. So we don't target innocent civilians, and rightly so. We distinguish between combatants and between non-combatants. And secondly, we value human and Jewish life more than anything else. I was less concerned that my sons would be, I never thought my sons would kill innocent civilians. I was always concerned that the army's restraint in not harming innocent civilians would endanger them. Israel's the opposite of most countries in the world. The hostage situation, no country on earth, Israel believes in its army, you don't leave anyone behind. Israel has paid exorbitant prices for hostages for decades, rightly or wrongly, but we have. And why is that? Because no people and no country values every single human and Jewish life more than the Jewish people. That is our greatest strength. It's become our greatest weakness because our enemies understand that. The reason why we could bring Iran to its knees in 12 days and Hezbollah, and we're still struggling with Hamas, no matter how much we destroy, is because, for God's sake, they have 50 of our children, 20 alive, and amongst the 28 we know deceased, our son Daniel. And because they know that, they knew it was not good enough to barbarically maim, murder, and kill the over 1,200 people they did on the day. They took 250 people, including dragging our son's body across the border, because they know what we will pay for a body. And we are prepared to pay for a body. In my opinion, we shouldn't be paying live terrorists for a body, because to set free a live terrorist which could endanger life in the future should be, in my opinion, a price being considered to get live people back. I think for bodies which it's not pikuach nefesh, we should pay a price, but not that price. And I know in Israel that's not the price that they're paying, it's bodies for bodies and life for life. But I think that the reason we value, I've tried to explain this to diplomats and heads of state, of why it's so important for us as Jews to bring the bodies back, because the body, as it says, I'll say it in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 24, that when the body lays hanging, the body, it's kilalati lokim, it's the curse of God. The body is the receptacle of God's presence, of the soul. And if you disrespect the body, like Hamas does, it means you disrespect a person in their life. Because if you desecrate bodies, it means that you don't respect the life that was in that body. And that's why the Jewish people have such respect for bodies, because we respect life. It all comes down to life in the absence of life. And it's become our greatest weakness, because it's our greatest strength, right? If we didn't have that love of life, this war would be over a long time ago. I don't believe any other people would allow so few of their own to dictate so much of their policy, because it's our greatest strength, and because of that, our enemies have manipulated it as our greatest weakness. One other thing I want to say, our greatest strength as a Jewish people in the state of Israel is we argue ourselves to death. There's not many people in the world that they tell the joke that, one Jew, like 3 opinions. What does a Jew do when she goes to the moon? We build 2 shuls, yeah? One you daven in and one you never step foot in, right? That's a Jewish joke. It's a Jewish joke. Why? Because what have Jews God says, Rav Kook, we are an amksha or a stiff-necked people. What does a stiff-necked people mean? It's a person who can only see in one direction. We've got such a passion, can't move left or right. We've got such a passion for truth and for the way we see things. And Israel, Rav Kook explains in his book, Orot, he says that the Jewish people are actually a little nucleus of the whole world. You can find every view in the Jewish people, from the biggest progressive atheist, left-wing, liberal woke on the left, to the most extreme, fanatical, both religious and nationalistic right, and all in one people. We've got this mixed up. We almost have the nucleus of all the views in the world within the Jewish people. It's our greatest strength. Passion for truth, different views of truth. Even the Torah, Shivim Panim Torah. So in the Torah, you can say there isn't one way to look at the truth. Elu ve'elu, there are lots of different ways. It's our greatest strength. And the Talmud is full of arguments and mafrokot because we understand truth is complex in many different ways, but it's also the root of our greatest weakness. Hamas understood on October 7th that we were arguing ourselves to death. The judicial reform, we took our eye off the ball. We got too focused on the internal issues as if the whole world, as if democracy and Israel, everything depended on it. And we said, you know what, Jews, maybe you aren't each other's enemy. Maybe there's another enemy which doesn't give a hoot if you believe in judicial reform, if you don't. Doesn't even give a hoot if you think you're Jewish. Doesn't even give a hoot. In fact, it doesn't even give a hoot if you know you're not Jewish. 21 Bedouins were killed on October 7th. Why? Because they were Zionists. Anyone who supported the Zionist endeavor, and that's the new anti-state Semitism, so it's anti-Zionism, that if you're a Jew or a non-Jew who supports Israel and believes in Israel and builds the state of Israel, then you are a legitimate Rahman Islam target. And therefore, I think that the root of our greatest strength of passion for truth is the root of our weakness, that we argued ourselves to death. We see that the person who doesn't have our truth is an opponent and an enemy. And the biggest challenge we have is less, not less, it's very much our enemy from without, but it's no less and even more the ability to come together from within. We know the temple was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam, causes hatred, which means a society which couldn't live with the different truths and lost itself in fanaticism. And I think that is our greatest challenge, as well as internal cohesion and unity within the Jewish people.
Rabbi Justice, do you have something to add right before you have to leave us?
I do, and I'm keen to hear Rabbi Doron's response to it as well. There was a very interesting passage in yesterday's parasha when Moshe Rabbeinu was told that he is going to pass on, and he needs to therefore pass on the leadership. Well, in fact, God doesn't say that. God just tells him he's going to die, and his immediate reaction was, who are you going to appoint to lead the people? Do not leave the people without leadership. The way that Chazal, Rashi in particular, interpret Moshe Rabbeinu's plea to God is extremely instructive. Because Moshe turns to Hashem and calls him Hashem Elokei Ruchot L'chol Basar, God of the spirit of all flesh. Actually, it's in our memorial prayers, we use that expression. Lord, the God, the spirit of all, so the word ruach is used, and when Hashem responds to appoint Yehoshua, he describes him as a man who has ruach. What is this notion of ruach that Moshe pleaded with Hashem to find, identify the new leader, and this feature that Hashem said was the hallmark of the person he chose? Now the word ruach is a very vague term, but Rashi brings the Medrash Tanchuma, and this is, according to Rashi, the pshat of the explanation of the text, and that is that the leader should have one single feature. Now if you were going to pick the one single feature for the leader of the Jewish people, what would it be? Anyone want it? Mr. Parker, come on. One word. Can't sit in the front row and not expect it. Obviously have to be a stand-up comedy routine. So, respect. Okay. Close, well done. The way that Rashi interprets it, the Midrash says, it's actually sablanut. patience, the ability to tolerate, sovel, to tolerate the opinions of different people. That is the single most important feature for the leader of the Jewish people that Moshe implored Hashem to find in a person, and that Hashem said he could find in Yeshua. So it's not strength, it's not a love of, it's not somebody who can sing Am Yisrael Chai the best or anything like that, or someone who will fight anti-Semitism the most. It's the person who can understand the ruach of every other person, Elokei HaRuchot, understand the thinking, the attitude, the approach of other people. And I think one of the things that I find very difficult about the present environment once we get beyond the unity of the people and their resilience, is just the ugliness of the discourse within Israel in a way that is the opposite, the very antithesis of that notion of being sovel, the ruach of others. And if there's one thing that I think really deflates, it's the absence of that tolerance. I'm sure it's there and it doesn't get much press as part of the problem. But it really is, when you're looking from afar, it's very difficult. It's really painful to see the lack of mutual respect, tolerance in political discourse in Israel. And so I think that, to me, that's the greatest challenge. But I'm keen for Doron to lift me from my despair.
When exactly do you have to go? No, that was not joking. Okay, so in 3 minutes I'll try. And then if it's okay, we'll let Rabbi Marcus go. I just want to, that point, just add to it for a few minutes afterwards, and then just segue into what we can do for Zionism today. You have any other questions?
I do.
Okay, no, that's fine. So what I'll do is I'll say the 3-minute answer, then if it's okay, we'll let Rabbi Marcus go. You'll ask me another question or whatever you want. Is it okay? Rabbi Marcus, first, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've also believed in it, absolutely written so much about it. It's almost more than anything else. It's the ability. I've always believed that the ability of a leader is exactly that. And anyone who's a community rabbi knows that the first thing is to put up with every different type of person, to put up with, to tolerate, to validate, to see. And if you don't have that ability, then leadership is not for you, number one. Number two, I believe it's not only every individual, it's every ideology. People can tolerate individuals. They can't tolerate their ideology. And in this group thing today of the cancel culture, you might be a very nice person, but I can't tolerate your ideology. And that's the ability to live with Shivim Panim Torah. That even God's absolute divine truth, where I believe I'm absolutely right, the chidush, the unique idea of Torah Judaism is I can be absolutely right, and so can you. And where did we learn that from? Where Hillel and Shammai couldn't disagree on so many issues, and came and they couldn't agree for 3 years. They had big arguments, and came a voice from heaven and said, "Eilu ve'eilu devarakim chaim." Both of those are right. So how can you both be right? Answer is when you have the humility to understand that truth is complex and people are complex, then you understand that there can be differing views. I do believe the Western society in general, and Israel in particular, are absolutely divided today. Our toleration and pluralism of every type of view has brought us to be destroying society from within, to the wokish progressive left and to the radical fundamentalist right. And Israel's reflection of what's going on all around the world. And I believe this is Israel's and the Jewish people's greatest mission. Our greatest mission is to show that even in the most impossible environment that another Western country faces, annihilation, and with so many issues, is to show that you can have deeply held views about the future of the Jewish state and Judaism, but in a respectful and tolerant way. I believe the extremism which is playing out in Israeli politics and in many ways, I believe is a call for all of us to say what I say is we need different radicals today. We need radicals in Rakus, Remold. We said if what caused the destruction of the temple was radical hatred of others and delegitimization of other views, we need today radical love of others, which says Jews are not the enemies one of the other. And even if we differ, we are in this together, and our collective fate will turn into destiny. And I believe, Rabbi Marcus, the challenge is that the fanatics and the extremists are a gross minority.
Can I ask you a tachlis?
Yeah.
So recently, and this is now old news, it's something more than legal in Israel, it's old news. But there was that incident where the head of the Labour Party, Yair Golan, made some very foolish comments, in my view, about soldiers. They were most injudicious, they were insulting, and I don't think he actually meant what he said, but it was, what he said was just completely unacceptable. In response to that, you had equally extreme, irresponsible, insulting, disrespectful commentary about him. Now, where is the voice that says, dear Mr. Golan, you couldn't possibly have meant that? And we urge you to clarify what you said, because instead there were these ridiculous condemnatory things. You're not even Jewish and all this sort of nonsense.
So to give a quick answer to that, I actually did have a response like that, but I just want to say, Yair Golan, who is on the extreme left of Israel, and I totally disagree with him on so many different things, he was one of the first people to arrive with a handgun down south to save people.
Exactly.
Which means, I said that, you don't judge a person only by their comments, but I do want to say he brought it on himself, and I just want to say why? No, not because of what he said, because of his response to what he said. Part of the problem in Israel, and by the way, arguably one of the greatest qualities of a leader, which is actually connected to that, King David, the sages say King David sinned twice, and yet God forgave him. Saul sinned once, and God didn't forgive him, he lost the kingship. My Ben shoulder David, what is it between Saul and David? Because David sinned terribly with Bathsheba and Uriah without going into the whole potential murder and adultery. And what was David's response? After came Nathan and Navi and gave him the worst possible over-exaggerated rebuke for his actions. What did he say? 2 words. Chatati Lashem, I was wrong. And God said, wow, a leader who can respond that I was wrong and I'll face the consequences, and you I can deal with. What Yair Golan should have said, and this is where politicians are terrible at apologizing, and I don't know who he took his silly, stupid advice from. He ordered that night, Mizrachi Shul, right? What's it in English? A press conference. I thought he was going to say and said, I'm so sorry I said that. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to say that we baby killers. It was a slip of the tongue. Obviously, I didn't mean it. He came on the attack and he said it. Stupid. Just get up. Yes, I know, and that's the problem. Get up and say, Jewish people, what a terrible mistake I made. I didn't mean that. Obviously, I didn't mean that. I was down there in the south. And yes, anti-Semites are using my words now against to say that we baby killers. It was a terrible mistake. I've thought about it. I didn't mean it. I said it in my frustration, and I was wrong. And you know what? I believe he would have been forgiven. But he tried to defend himself. By the way, Naftali Bennett, when he was running many, many years ago for the head of the Jewish Home Party, he had an expression saying, you don't have to apologize. Lots of people say, by the way, it wasn't about things you've done wrong. He was saying that we as religions don't have to apologize. I didn't like that. Don't ever have a campaign saying we don't have to apologize. You always have to apologize. Anyone who's married knows that, right? You cannot apologize enough. Say, okay, Shirley, I'm sorry, what have I done? What haven't I done wrong yet? If you know what I mean. But, I'm just joking about that, but everyone who knows that you have to apologize.
The fault is not just with him, those who responded.
Absolutely, and absolutely, it's not just with him. But what's the problem? Nobody apologizes today. Why is that? We become so self-righteous, and I agree with you. I do believe in the Bibi Netanyahu era it's not going to change, and I don't believe it's all Bibi Netanyahu's fault. I must be honest, for me it's always been difficult that the Prime Minister of Israel hasn't yet once said, I also am responsible for what happened on October 7th. I don't believe he's most responsible. I believe the head of the Shin Bet and the head of Israeli intelligence and army are more responsible than him. But no responsibility? Since when has the head got no responsibility, no accountability?
I'm going to apologize.
Okay. I'll let you go, okay? I'm going to continue with it. Thank you. Thank you. We'll just keep you for a few minutes longer. Don't run yet if you don't have to. Huh? But I just want to say that I believe personally that Bibi Netanyahu is one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people, to be able to be a president, a prime minister of Israel for 20 years. It's the hardest job in the world, with the most malicious personal attacks. And what he saw in 1982 already of Iran, and what he did is a 40 years life work. He's one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that there aren't areas, even a great leader. For me, it's been disappointing. I think he's an unbelievable leader. No responsibility. Now, I don't believe that Bibi Netanyahu, it's all his fault why he's become so divisive. The left have been out to get him for years and years. Professor Alan Dershowitz has said that the case against Bibi Netanyahu of trying to put him behind bars for a relationship with a journalist, said Alan Dershowitz, one of the cases, there's never been anything like that. It's unprecedented in the whole Western world. Every politician's got a relationship with journalists. He says, you want to make a person to be a criminal based on a precedent. It almost seems as if we're going to get him, and now let's find out how. So I do believe that part of it is uncalled for, and I believe that he's been responding to that. However, the net result of that has been an unbelievably divisive Israel, and I don't know whose fault it is, and I'm not even pointing fingers at anybody. I'm just saying that the culture that has been, and everybody, we can all point fingers at everybody, and I think when we point fingers at everyone, it means because everyone's got a measure of responsibility. But I do believe that world politics and Israeli politics needs, going forward, as Rabbi Marcus was saying, a less polarizing politics, that you can vehemently hold a view and vehemently hold an opposing view. And I'll just say one comment on this. Why do we rule like Beit Hillel and not like Beit Shammai? Why do we rule like Beit Hillel and not like Beit Shammai? The Gemara says in Hasidic Yomot of Yudalet that Beit Shammai were cleverer than Beit Hillel. They actually knew how to learn better than Beit Shammai, than Beit Hillel. So why do we rule like Beit Shammai? So like Beit Hillel. The Gemara says, I think it's Masid Arabi Daf Yud Gimel, Yudalet says as follows: because Beit Hillel were more humble and meek. They always quoted the opinion of Beit Shammai with themselves, and they brought the opinion of Beit Shammai before themselves. You know who the person who's really got it? The person who knows that they don't fully have it. The person who says, I've got a very strong view, but I don't know 100% if I'm right. Because who knows 100%? All these experts, they're convinced that they're right, and then all of a sudden things happen and they change that. But we don't know what we do. We recognize we're right. We believe we're right. And the person who's truly wise, who says, I believe that I'm right. I believe that your view has validation, and I'm going to bring your opinion along with mine, and actually even start with to validate your opinion as a perception of truth, and then I'm going to vehemently disagree with it. And that's why they say Hillel and Shammai, their daughters and sons, married each other. They had an appreciation for each other and what they stood for. And I believe most people have this. We've just got lost in polarizing politics. We've got lost in politics, which is just puts the perspective before the person, puts the principle before the person, and politics feeds into this, and everybody's feeding into it. And I believe true Jewish politics is what I call Davidian politics. King David's greatest achievement was his ability to bring the tribes together, was to hear even his political opponents, King Saul and his children and his ministers, was to give them a place in his cabinet and to bring them in to understand that fellow Jews are not enemies, who may be political opponents, and there can be deep respect even if you disagree. And I do believe we will eventually, please God, reclaim it.
Amen. Well, with regards to speaking about politics, can you tell us a little bit about the World Zionist Congress for those who maybe still are unaware?
I can't, I know nothing about it. No, let me tell you. I want to tell you before you run, even if you have voted, and certainly if you haven't voted, I want to tell you what you can do. And this is actually the reason I came to Australia at this time, is because, and I'll be very brief about this, and even if you have already voted, I want you to make sure that every person you know has voted, your spouse, your parents, your auntie, your uncle, your children, everyone above 18 and everybody you know. And I want to tell you why it's so important, even if you don't vote for Mizrachi. But if you're here, you should vote for Mizrachi. But you can do whatever you want to, and that's what we've all done. But I just want to say this. I call this the most important election that Jews have never heard of. Why is that? Firstly, justified. There hasn't been an election in Australia for almost 30 years. Let me tell you how and why it's so impactful, and you've got less than 1 week left to vote online, and we'll explain to you how you can do that, and not just you, but everybody you know. And I want to say vote even if you don't vote for Mizrachi. Because for a very simple reason. We need every Jew today to identify as a Zionist. What is it that our enemies want to do? Our enemies want Jews around the world to do what many extreme progressive Jews are doing. Not many, few, but vocal. Saying, not in my name. Zionism is not in my name. We don't believe in nationalist, militaristic states of killing babies and all of that. We don't believe in that. Judaism is for us tikkun olam and fixing the world and its universal values, and we distance ourselves from Israel's heinous acts, chas v'shalom. Or very, very, very few on the extreme ultra-Orthodox right, thankfully so few of them. Few hundred. There's thankfully so few, but I've seen them in action on the Israel parade in America and in Canada, and it's very painful, but thankfully very, 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 very few who march with the enemies and march with Hamas and justify Hamas. The vast, vast, vast majority of Jews are part of the vast majority. But what is it that our enemies want? Today, anti-Semitism is no longer hatred of the Jewish people, as I've spoken about over Shabbos, or hatred of Judaism. Today, for all types of reasons, Jew hatred is hatred of the Jewish state. You cannot stand up anywhere around the world, as I've said throughout Shabbos, and say, I hate Jews. You can't say that in any Western country. You cannot say, I hate Judaism, and Jews should be killed. But you can stand up anywhere in the Western world and say, I love Jews, I hate Zionists. Zionists should be killed. The state of Israel should be destroyed from the river to the sea, death to the IDF. Why? Nothing against Jews, just let's kill the 7 million that there are there. And why? Not because we hate Jews, we hate the Jewish state. We hate these barbaric, baby-killing Jews, the bloodline of our generation. And therefore, what is under attack, not Judaism and the Jewish people, but the Jewish state, i.e. Zionism. And therefore, our response has to be the absolute connection between the Jewish people and Torah, to the centrality of the land and state of Israel. And if it's not as perfect as we want it to be, then certainly not to distance ourselves from it, to throw our lot in with it and do whatever we can to play our role. And I think that is our greatest challenge. The World Zionist Movement, everyone has an opportunity to join this, and I want to just share with you very briefly what it is. The World Zionist Movement was founded by Herzl 128 years ago. It still exists today, but what people don't know is even in a post-State of Israel era, it's something that all of you have a say in, and it's an unbelievably important organization. The World Zionist Organization controls one of the strongest and most impactful Jewish non-profit organizations called Keren Kayemet Israel. Kakal Keren Kayemet Israel is the landowner of Israel. People do not know that the landowner of Israel is not the government of Israel, not the parliament of Israel. The vast majority of state-owned land is not owned by the state, it's owned by you. Who's it owned by? It's owned by the Jewish people. And what mechanism was created, which actually founded the Keren Kayemet and started buying land pre-state? Keren Kayemet Israel. Remember the blue pushkas which used to put money in, and it went towards land acquisition. Well, your investments have borne fruit. Keren Kayemet Israel owns the vast majority of land in our home. The Yad Binyamin, when we bought it, we paid a 13% land tax to Keren Kayemet Israel. People do not know that the landowner of Israel, what I think you call in Australia is federal land or crown land. It's called crown land in Canada and federal land in Israel. There isn't something like that. The majority of land is owned by Keren Kayemet Israel. And who owns Keren Kayemet Israel? The World Zionist Organization. And who owns the World Zionist Organization? You do. If you vote, let me explain. It's 40% owned by the Israeli Knesset in elections, which is supposed to happen every 4 years and 5 years in Israel. They happen every 4 minutes. But that's in Israel. The Knesset in Israel is a 40% owner. American Jewry through the American Zionist Movement is a 30% owner, and the remaining 30% is the rest of the world, the Commonwealth and the rest of the world, of which Australia is a significant part. Therefore, 60% of the stake of Keren Kayemet and the World Zionist Organization is diaspora Jews, 30% America, 30% the rest of the world. Israelis have acted as if they own it and run it 100%, and there's a good reason for that. The land of Israel, when I last checked, is in Israel. It's in the state of Israel. And Israelis are living there, so they understand the running of the land. But the custodians of the Jewish people, and everyone has a vote, and it affects billions and billions of dollars every year, and how money is spent and what's done with this. as Jews such as myself and others have got more involved in Israel, we've actually more and more of us have realized the role that diaspora Jews actually have. Now, Australia hasn't had an election for 30 years, South Africa even longer, because for all types of reasons, there wasn't enough incentive. People didn't understand what it was about. The Zionist federations every 5 years just ticked over the arrangements that it had between all the parties. Mizrachi has 4 of those 13. Likud, which isn't too active in Australia as it could be, has 1, World Likud, and the rest are from Reform, Conservative and Progressive parties. It's just ticked over every year like this. It's changed now. Now there's all types of shifts. I want to say a positive change is there's an ultra-Orthodox, like a Litvische Haredi movement called Eretz HaKodesh. And even though there isn't a very strong type community like this in Australia, they are running in Australia and around the world, and I think it's a good thing. As I say, we need Zionists wherever we can get them. If somebody wants to say, I'm not a card-carrying Zionist, but I want to join the World Zionist movement, I say, unbelievable. Anyone who's prepared to say, I stand up for Israel today, I think it is, in this way, I think it is unbelievable. And they're doing a good work. But the Mizrachi movement that I have playing a role in, together with so many of the Chabad rabbis and rabbis in New South Wales and many, because in most places around the world there's a very strong connection between Mizrachi and Chabad, and we have something called the Orthodox Israel Coalition Mizrachi has been, as I was saying, Chabad has been at the forefront of saving Jews all around the world. The Mizrachi religious Zionist community has been at the forefront in the Zionist institutions of not only playing a role in Israel, but also in the World Zionist Organization. And I'm one of the people who plays a role there. And for the first time in 20 or 30 years, Australian Jews can vote. It's open. And I want to implore you all to vote. If you're a person, if I was in a Reform synagogue, which I haven't been to one yet, or if I was in a conservative one, I would say vote for your Reform movement. Why? Because if that's who you are, and that's how you want to express your Zionism, as much as I vehemently disagree with you, if you're a progressive Jew, we need progressive Jews part of the Zionist movement, not attacking the Zionist movement. And if you're an ultra-Orthodox Jew who is campaigning Israel not to send your sons to the army, and even though I have vehement disagreement, if you're prepared to join, even if you're joining for money and for things, welcome aboard. We need people to identify however we can. But I just want to say to you that the Mizrachi movement has been part of this since the beginning. We do not ask the Zionist movement what it can do for us, to quote JFK. We ask ourselves what we can do for it. And we've been part of Zionism from the word go, and I want to implore you all, vote for whoever you want to vote for. But if you are an Orthodox Jew, a traditional religious Orthodox Jew, and you believe in the centrality of Israel and the importance of supporting Israel, there's an opportunity to stand up and make sure that the leadership of the Zionist Federation in Australia will not reflect the government that you currently have in Australia. 8 out of 13 until now historically has been led by the left, and the left are our brothers. And I will say, if I was in a Reform or a Conservative Shul or with hard left Jews, I would say, vote for yourselves. We need you part of Zionism, we want you inside. But when I'm saying to the majority, I believe, of Australian Jewry, who are Orthodox, traditional, the shul they don't go to is an Orthodox shul, even though there aren't many shuls like that. Baruch Hashem, there's Chabad everywhere, so there's no excuse not to go to shul anywhere. And if we don't stand up and have the strong, nuanced, religious, traditional, Jewish, Zionist voices, then you know who sets the table, sets the scene, the people on the periphery. And you have them fighting each other. A lot of these elections around the world have been one side attacking the other, and other side attacking the other. We haven't done that once, and we'll never do it, because our enemies will not attack other ideologies for political gain. I believe it's against the Torah, and even if other people do it, doesn't mean it's right. Too many people are fighting their holy wars. The only holy war we have is against Hamas, against Hezbollah and Iran, and those who wish to destroy the Jewish people. Everyone else, we're part of the same team. Even if we're running in different directions, okay, we've got to get our act together, but we need to be part of the same team. And the way you can do it is, there'll be a link sent out to you. You can get this link, you go on, you tap on it, put in your name, you go to the Zionist Federation, and there are 5 states over there. As I said, there are a number of them there, and state number 5 is the Mizrachi state, which is the broadest, Orthodox, traditional, religious, Jewish, Zionist support of Israel. And I believe if we have a very, very strong turnout, not only around the world, because if you add up all the voices around the world, but in Australia, the tone of the Zionist Movement Federation will be set by people who come forward and passionately believe in this, and all of it adds up to around the world to be able to play that role at a global level. And I'll just end with one thought. I sometimes said during the judicial reform, I'll end with this, during the judicial reform, when it was causing such machloket in Israel until October 6th, and it still is, I sat in some of the Zionist Federation meetings, which I represent Mizrachi, and you had people from the extreme right attacking the left, and the left attacking the right. And I stood up and I said, you know, we are not the decision makers about judicial reform. You know, I want to say, thankfully, I'm not a decision maker about whether the hostages come back. I'm doing everything in my power to bring my son back and to do whatever I can in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. But I think the decision makers are impossible for the situation. Churchill said that in political leadership, your decisions are often between bad and worse. Both decisions are bad. To pay horrific prices to bring back hostages is terrible because people might die as a result of it. Not to pay horrific prices to bring them back is also terrible because hostages will die because of it. So what's the right thing to do? Thank God I don't have to make that decision. It's an impossible decision. I've got my views, but it's actually irrelevant what my view is because I'm not the decision maker. I'm a father who's doing whatever he can to bring his son back for burial. But I do want to say this. We don't have to argue ourselves to death in decisions that we don't need to make. Let the politicians argue. Do you know what our sages have told us? In decisions you don't need to make, judge other people favorably. If you're not a judge and you're not a decision maker, you don't have to rule against people, then don't. Maybe our role is to judge, like Rabbi justify other people. Look for the good in their opinion. Why? Because you're not the decision maker. If you're the decision maker, okay, then you've got to make a decision. And even if you're the decision maker, like Hillel and Shammai, Hillel was able always to justify Shammai before he vehemently disagreed with him. And even if you're the decision maker, but if you're not the decision maker, I stood up and I said, we do not decide in judicial reform. Why are we bringing the divisive Israeli politics into the World Zionist Organization to argue ourselves to the death that we can't speak to each other? For God's sake, we're not the decision makers. Is there not one place where Jews can respectfully disagree? Understanding the Knesset you can't because everyone's trying to influence the decision. We don't. They wanted to have the Zionist Organization. The left wanted to push for a statement against judicial reform, the right for judicial reform. I said, we don't have to make statements. All this going to do is divide us. How about creating a safe space where we can vehemently but respectfully disagree with each other? And it wasn't so easy at that time. It's still not so easy today. And I really believe that's a voice that Mizrachi brings. And when I say also the Chabad influence, what Chabad and Mizrachi I think have very much in connection is a deep Ahavat Israel, a love of our fellow Jews, and love of our fellow Jews, of understanding that we are in this together. We are in this together. And that is, I think, what we need. And I think fundamentalists are people who put ideas and principles before people, and radical Ahavat Israel people are people who put the Jewish people and the love of the Jewish people before the ideas. Because one of the greatest ideas we have is Klal Israel, and this has to be the foundation. And I want to urge you all, not only you to vote, and as I said, all your family members and friends. If we turn out our community across Australia, we have 1 more week to do it, I believe it can change the face of the tone of the Australian Zionist movement and change the tone when it all adds up into the future unity and integrity of the Zionist movement, not to mention that incredible amounts of budgets that can be used for shlichim and all types of things, and we just helped one of the Chabad communities in Israel build a whole new Chabad Shul in Israel through this. There's tremendous influence through this, but it's first and foremost to bring our flavor of Ahavat Yisrael to the World Zionist Organization, and through that, through the prism of values, ensure that these values can support the Jewish people in general and all our communities and the values that we believe in.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Doron. Thank you again for coming.
Just before I hand over to our I want to thank Rabbi. I know it's New South Wales rabbinate, but I think you're the president of it, and this is the Mizrachi Shul. And I thank Rav Shur and Rabbi Michal for all they do and for hosting this event. Thank you very, very much. And just before I hand over to Rav Shur, I just want to say that these are stickers that we put together for our, in Israel, we do all these stickers for people who passed away in the South San Daniel. A lot of them are in Hebrew and some are in English. And these stickers, I'll just leave Hebrew and English, but The reason why it says, if not me, then who? Imrani Azmi, is because our son, as I've often spoke about, he left us a diary, which we didn't know about, which returned from Nachal's army base where he fought on the day. And his possessions came back a few months later. And in that, one of the beautiful things, there was a diary, the notebook that he kept as an officer. And he wrote in his diary, that since he'd been on the front page, since he'd been to Poland in grade 11, and seen the price that Jewish people paid when we did not have the ability to defend ourselves, now that we do, he said, I feel it's my responsibility to do what I can. He wrote the following 5 words in Hebrew, Im lo ani, that's me, if not me, then who? And on that day, when the Jewish people needed him most, him and his tank crew, they were the first people, somebody called Kobi Levy, who he was the medic of the unit and survived. It's a whole story. He came during the Shiva. I'd never met him before, and he said to me, I was with Daniel in the air raid shelter before he went into his tank. And I said, Kobi, you can help me. I know Daniel's uniform was found, and that's why even though his body's not back from Gaza, we buried his uniform in Mount Herzl. We were the only grave since the beginning of the war in Mount Herzl where there's a grave but no body. His body's in Gaza City. But we're lucky that we found blood on his uniform. It was so difficult for my wife and I to know that he'd been injured, but in retrospect, it's a blessing in disguise because of that we have a grave and it was buried on Mount Herzl. But we noticed that the uniform had no bullet hole in it. It was full of blood but no bullet hole. So my son Jonathan said, well, maybe he wasn't wearing the uniform. Maybe he rushed to get into the tank and he just took it in with him. And sometimes you bring in extra uniforms. And why is it a blood-drenched uniform which didn't have a bullet hole? And when this Kobi Levy came and he came during the Shiva, he said, you saw Daniel in the morning before we went to the tank? I said to him, was he wearing his uniform? And this was his answer. He said, Doron, you know your son. Him and the other 3 members of the tank came dressed from head to toe, ready for battle, as if they were born for that day. They were the first ones in the tank, and they fought unbelievably. There's a whole recording of the tank, which of the inner communications, like absolute heroes, and on that day it was Imran Yazmi to do whatever he could to defend as much Jewish life as possible. I will just say that the reason why there was no bullet hole is probably because from the video footage that I haven't seen, but they declared his death on day 163 based on video footage that he was shot in the back of the neck, and that must have been blood which dripped down onto his uniform, and that we only sort of worked out after the chief rabbi of the army strongly urged me not to see the video, because the reason why most families, somebody has seen the video is because you just want to make 100% sure that he's deceased, because this is the first time maybe in halachic history that people are being declared dead, not in order to allow somebody to remarry Naguna, just to give comfort to the family based on video footage. I don't know if in halachic history that based on a video or pictures, people are declared dead. And he explained to me how, he said it's only if doctors and the Shin Bet and Israeli military intelligence analyze all the evidence independently, and they reach the conclusion independently that A, the person in the picture is deceased, and B, it's the person they think it is, only then they declare the death. And I asked him if I could watch the video, and he said, Doron, I strongly advise you not to. He said, it's difficult. It's difficult to see, for me to see, and he's your son, so we've chosen not to. I feel thankful that I have no doubts, unfortunately, that he's not alive. I will tell you that there are some of the 28, 2 cases where the mothers have not accepted that the son is dead. Even with evidence, they said, bring me back the body. And until then, one of them didn't sit Shiva. And they said, you bring me back the body. Until then, he's alive. And I feel grateful. You have to be grateful for lots of different things. I feel grateful that I don't have that gnawing suspicion, because if I did, it would be tenfold more difficult. And I'm grateful that we feel that even though we haven't seen the video. I was convinced that the evidence was strong enough. But I just wanted to share that we're lucky that we actually have a grave, and we hope and pray that all the houses will come soon, and he'll come soon for burial.
Just to conclude, first of all, a big